United Nations holds an emergency meeting following a suspected chemical attack in Syria. Brexit continues to spark controversy as London engages in a heated dispute with Brussels and Spain over the sovereignty of Gibraltar. And young African designers promote activism through video games. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. Now, with the world watching, the United Nations Security Council is holding an emergency meeting Wednesday to discuss the chemical weapons attack in Syria. That Western relief group say killed at least 100 people and struck 350 others in the Idlib provincial town of Khan Sheikhoun, as the international condemnation of the incident grows and the horrific images of suffering that shocked the conscience of the world are replayed into living rooms around the globe. The World Health Organization says the victims appear to show symptoms consistent with exposure to a nerve agent. Observers, diplomats and analysts are blaming the attack on forces loyal to President Bashar al-Assad and his Russian allies. Syria's government has repeatedly denied using chemical weapons against civilians, and Russia has categorically denied any role in the attack.
The Syrian aviation launched a strike on a large terrorist ammunition depot and a concentration of military hardware on the eastern outskirts of the town of Khan Sheikhoun. On the territory of this depot were workshops which produce chemical warfare munitions. Terrorists had been transporting chemical munitions from this large arsenal to the territory of Iraq.
Well, the opposition Syrian National Coalition described the attack as a horrifying massacre, widely believed to be the worst such violation of international law in Syria since 2013, when a UN probe found sarin gas killed hundreds of civilians near Damascus. The White House is condemning the Syrian government's suspected gas attack on civilians, and as VOA's Sladin Zahok reports, a Middle East expert says Bashar al-Assad's latest use of poisonous gas signals that Damascus is currently unconcerned about possible consequences.
The White House Tuesday condemned what it called a reprehensible chemical attack against civilians by the Syrian government and said these heinous actions must not be ignored by the civilized world. The statement by President Donald Trump, read by a White House spokesman, blamed the attack on what he called the weakness of the past U.S. administration.
President Obama said in 2012 that he would establish a quote-unquote red line against the use of chemical weapons, and then did nothing.
After Assad's sarin attacks of 2013 that outraged the world, Trump urged Obama to refrain from any action in Syria, saying the U.S. would not benefit from getting involved. Commentators were quick to point that out.
So to now blame the Democrats for the Trump administration's refusal to act strikes me as incredibly hypocritical.
Middle East expert Stephen Heidemann spoke to VOA via Skype. He said the Syrian government is clearly behind Tuesday's attack.
I think it's partly because they expect Russian support, and it's partly because they feel that the mechanisms of accountability that might sanction Syria for the use of those kinds of weapons have been weakened, partly by the gains that they've achieved on the ground and partly by the election of Donald Trump.
Heidemann said the UN Security Council must vote to penalize Syria's government for the war crimes it has committed against its people. If Russia or any other veto-wielding council member blocks the move, it will be exposed as an accomplice in the crime. Russia categorically denied involvement in the attack. Rights group Amnesty International said the perpetrators must be found and held accountable.
It's important to note as well that there have been other chemical attacks over the years by government and non-government armed groups. And these attacks have been confirmed by UN reports over the years. And yet nobody has been held to justice.
Witnesses say Tuesday's attack was one of the deadliest chemical weapons attacks in Syria since 2013. Zlati Zahok, VOA News, Washington.
Well, turning to East Africa, a deadly attack in Somalia has killed at least 7 people after a car filled with explosives detonated outside a restaurant in Mogadishu on Wednesday. The restaurant is located near the offices that house the Ministries of Internal Security and Youth and Sports. A Somali police officer at the scene says the explosion was a massive explosion. A government spokesman says more than 10 people were wounded. Reuters news service says the incident occurred after the new security minister, Mohammed Abukar Islo, took office, promising he would come up with a plan to tighten security. There has been no claim of responsibility, but the Al-Shabaab terrorist group has carried out similar attacks in the past. U.S. President Donald Trump and China's Xi Jinping are meeting face-to-face for the first time at Mr. Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida on Thursday. The president has already predicted the high-stakes meeting will be difficult given America's massive trade deficit with China. Other issues that are sure to be discussed are North Korea's growing missile program and Beijing's militarization of the South China Sea. Now, VOA's Bill Ide reports from Beijing.
Just days before their meeting, President Trump issued 2 executive orders calling for a review of trade deficits and pledging severe consequences for those who cheat on trade. He did not mention China specifically, but did tweet about Chinese trade practices before signing the orders. Xi's 2-day visit to Florida is unlikely to resolve such complex issues, analysts say, but it could help set relations on a better path.
So clearly, President Xi Jinping is looking to establish a working relationship with President Trump so that the two sides can go through the many issues that are on the bilateral agenda. A strong personal relationship, working relationship, is crucial to achieving the bilateral goals from both sides.
Clearly, China is listening, and Beijing is trying to play up how it can help make America great again and address imbalances. Beijing denies it is deliberately seeking a trade surplus.
China will further increase domestic demand and will also raise demand for foreign goods and services, including those from the United States. Chinese investment in the U.S. has been rising rapidly in recent years.
Analysts say that much like its initial interactions with the administration, Beijing will be looking for some sort of feel-good statement to help set the tone for the relationship going forward. However, whether it is North Korea or trade, the Trump administration says it is focused on results.
The United States has seen China for 25-plus years say that they're concerned about North Korea, but we haven't seen them act like they're concerned about North Korea. And so I think this administration wants to see them act, and I think they're going to pressure them to do that.
Pressuring China on trade or North Korea, however, may be a deal breaker, not maker. It could also add uncertainty at a time when both sides are searching for a way forward, despite huge differences. Bill Ide, VOA News, Beijing.
America's infrastructure is crumbling. The American Society of Civil Engineers says a large portion of U.S. roads, bridges, and public works are showing significant deterioration. President Trump on Tuesday reiterated his promise to spend $1 trillion to overhaul the country's infrastructure. For many communities, that money can't come fast enough. Here's VOA's Arash Rabasani.
In December of 2015, this piece of local history took a fall. The city of Pittsburgh's Greenfield Bridge is now among thousands of critical infrastructure projects underway in the United States. Projects like fixing the 95-year-old bridge are too expensive for most local communities to finance themselves. Without help from federal and state governments, this project doesn't happen.
We need it. Everyone needs it, not only here in Pittsburgh and Western Pennsylvania, but all over the country. We have old infrastructure. We have failing infrastructures out there. So all the funding we can make available is great.
Top city official Guy Costa says federal money covers 80% of the repairs, with 15% coming from Pennsylvania and 5% coming from the city of Pittsburgh, which means a $19 million bridge cost the city just $1 million. President Trump campaigned on a promise that he'll ask Congress to pass legislation funding a $1 trillion overhaul of the country's decaying infrastructure. Local officials say it is long overdue.
We build out all this infrastructure, and we build absolutely nothing to maintain it. Zero. Nothing.
Pittsburgh was once an industrial town specializing in steel production. But like many older cities, urban sprawl connecting downtown Pittsburgh to the suburbs meant more money was spent on new projects and less spent maintaining older ones.
It is no different than your house. And your roof starts to leak, and you just ignore it, and you ignore it, and you ignore it, and one day you wake up and you have to replace your entire roof.
But the bureaucratic process is slow.
A lot of the funding, from the time that it's approved in Washington and it gets to the local level could be years. And then from there you have to go into a 4-year design process.
This infrastructure project affects nearly 20,000 people. And that's just one bridge in a city of some 300,000 people. Imagine this all over the country. With progress comes inconvenience. The thousands of commuters who use the Greenfield Bridge now drive through once quiet suburbs.
It has created such a mess and such a disturbance that I've considered selling my house. It's awful.
The Greenfield Bridge is scheduled to open in mid-2017 with funds approved by the Obama administration. The fate of the nation's 58,000 at-risk bridges now depends on President Trump convincing Congress to make his campaign promise become a reality. Arash Arabasadi, VOA News, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Well, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. Also, check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince McCory. Coming up, Brexit, Britain, Spain, and Gibraltar. The new separation stirs up all disputes. Stay with us.
This is BizBeat.
In Croatia, surrounded by the Adriatic Sea, lies the peninsula Istria, where Istrian olive groves dominate the landscape.
Transfer it practically in all over our mouth and make like this.
Olive grower Teddy Chauvelin explains the proper way to taste olive oil. Istria now supplies 12% of the world's olive oil market. Olive grower Nicoletta Belija says time has been kind to the growers here as things have changed.
Because the cultivating methods were different, the time when olives used to be picked was different.
Belija says today that flavors are spicier and more aromatic, and experts say climate change has been a factor affecting the quality of the groves. Award-winning oil maker Antonio Pastrovicchio. He says we've embraced serious labor 20 years ago, and now we're seeing the results of that, finally surpassing Tuscany as the best olive oil in the world 2 years in a row. For VOA's BizBeat, I'm Philip Alexio.
Welcome back. In Wednesday's business report, the need for infrastructure improvements in the developing world is critical. But how the money is actually invested can make or break a project. Reporting from New York with the details is Africa 54 business correspondent Jill Malandrino. Hi, Jill.
Hi there. So I wanted to examine infrastructure spend because it's a relevant topic in American politics, and along with technology and healthcare, one of the biggest priorities for Africa and the developing world. Now, courts recently reviewed where the issues lie for the U.S. and Africa, and you will see how some of these things are common. Let's take a look at the issues that the U.S. faces. Political wrangling has put off decisions to renew the nation's infrastructure for decades. Inadequate investment and maintenance has resulted in the degradation of existing facilities, requiring many of them to be totally replaced. The high costs of starting afresh are often associated with paying for construction and deferring maintenance costs into the future.
Now, this looks very typical across all nations that they would wait until there's like a total or near collapse before they make decisions to finance critical infrastructure, right?
Oh, we just saw that in the last segment that was on. Courts points out as well that a large part of the problem is reliance on procurement procedures that focus on awarding contracts to the lowest bidder. Now, to win in the competition, construction firms look for places to trim their budgets. Maintenance is usually an easy target for cuts. In many cases, maintenance is subjected to separate contracts. Those cuts eventually add to capital and human costs. Just look at the weekly issues Amtrak and New Jersey Transit has had over the past year. Our infrastructure is in dire need of repair, and oftentimes it results in business being deferred elsewhere.
So it looked like the challenge for Africa is not to make decisions based on what might appear to be diminished capacity to manage the infrastructure projects, but rather building the core foundation for the economic growth of those nations.
That's exactly right. For example, Nigeria closed down Abuja Airport for repairs to its runway. Passengers fly to the northern city of Kaduna, where they are transported 190 kilometers by rail or in guarded buses to the federal capital and the second busiest airport. Additional costs are likely to be incurred in foregone businesses, and people defer travel to the country. Locally, the aviation minister has had to relocate his office to Kaduna for the period of the repairs. Now, what the U.S. and Africa are doing is what's called batch management, whereas a continuous approach to infrastructure management makes the most economic sense in the long run.
Well, I don't want to make a trip there anytime soon. Jill, thank you very much, as always.
Thank you.
That's Africa 54 business correspondent Jill Malandrino reporting from New York. Now, Britain's exit process from the European Union only formally began last week, but already London is engaged in a heated dispute with Brussels and Spain over the future sovereignty of its overseas territory of Gibraltar. One prominent Brexit supporter says that Britain is prepared to go to war over the issue, although Britain's Prime Minister is playing this possibility down. Henry Ridgwell has more from London.
Gibraltar, a rocky outcrop on the southern tip of Spain, was ceded to Britain by Madrid just over 300 years ago. It's been an occasional source of tension ever since. In its negotiating guidelines published last week, the EU said that any deal struck between the bloc and Britain won't apply to Gibraltar unless Spain agrees to it.
Now that the UK is not in the EU, then the EU will now defend its members' interests, and in this case, the members' interests are Spain. And so Britain really doesn't have much of a way into that discussion.
The EU's inclusion of Gibraltar has angered many British lawmakers, as events were held over the weekend marking the 35th anniversary of the Falklands War, when Britain fought off an Argentine invasion of the disputed archipelago in the South Atlantic. Invoking that war, former leader of the ruling Conservative Party, Michael Howard, said current Prime Minister Theresa May is prepared to fight for Gibraltar.
35 years ago this week, another woman Prime Minister sent a task force halfway across the world to defend the freedom of another small group of British people against another Spanish-speaking country. And I'm absolutely certain that our current Prime Minister will show the same resolve in standing by the people of Gibraltar.
Spain expressed surprise over the tone of Britain's response.
To bring into the debate events from the past, like the Malvinas Islands, is completely out of context. To be frank, someone in the United Kingdom is losing their calm, and there is no reason for doing that.
Gibraltar's residents face an uncertain future. 96% voted to remain in the EU. The economy, primarily financial services and gambling, is reliant on membership of the single market.
There's not so much that Spain will take Gibraltar over or have a much more serious threat on British sovereignty of Gibraltar, but rather that the economic basis of Gibraltar is threatened.
Spain dealt Britain another setback by suggesting it would not veto any effort by an independent Scotland to join the European Union, raising the possibility that the United Kingdom could split after Brexit. Henry Ridgwell for VOA News, London.
Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. How young African designers are making video games the key to a better tomorrow. We'll be right back.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. In Somalia, at least 7 people are killed and 10 wounded when a car bomb explodes at a restaurant near the Ministry of Internal Security in the capital, Mogadishu. In Benin, Parliament narrowly rejects a proposal from President Patrice Talon to amend the constitution to include a single presidential term limit. In Mozambique, the city of Pemba is becoming a boom town after the discovery of offshore gas reserves in 2010. In Kenya, drought continues to ravage livestock and land in the Turkana region, resulting in serious challenges for local pastoral communities. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
How do you see the world?
I see countries in turmoil.
I see our planet changing.
I see people at peace.
No matter how you see the world, you'll get an unbiased and uncensored view of it on Voice of America. On television, radio, online, and mobile, in more than 40 languages all day, every day. Millions of people tune us in.
How do I see the world? On Voice of America.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. Some of Africa's biggest art gallery owners and artists brought their best to the Grand Palais in Paris for the 19th edition of the Art Paris Fair. Some 20 art galleries from countries like South Africa, Ivory Coast, Nigeria, Uganda, Tunisia, Morocco, and Europe are showcasing a wide range of emerging artists from the continent and the diaspora. The pieces in the exhibition cut across different genres that included photography, collage, and oil paintings, sculptures, videos, and more. Now, the event also allowed many artists whose works have never been shown outside of their native countries to gain more exposure. Well, next up, we may live in a digital age, but many Vinley fans believe nothing beats the quality of audio from a traditional record player. Driven by booming sales, a turntable manufacturer in the Czech Republic is cashing in on the Vinley revival. Sev Litoval's commitment to the turntable making is a strategy that has paid off in recent years. In 2012, the year-on-year sales went up nearly 40%, followed by about 46% in 2013. That's according to company sales. Now the company figures. Now the best sellers are those that cost between $300 to $400, according to the Recording Industry Association of America. Vinley revenues in the United States in 2015 were $416 million. That's the highest level since 1988. Well, and finally, it can be a dog's life for pets and their owners in Egypt. Gridlocked streets and a lack of open space make it difficult to get out and about in Cairo. But a local animal center hopes to change that with what it says is the city's first outdoor gym just for dogs. The East Wind Center provides a large open space for dogs that are often kept cooped up in apartments, isolated from others, and prone to behavioral problems and boredom. Jumping hurdles and maneuvering through obstacles gives both animals and owners much needed exercise. For those doggies who need a bit more help, behavioral experts at the gym are there to help. And that's our trending today. Now, two West African graduates at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles have created a mobile gaming company called Kdabi that aims to change the world one video game at a time through philanthropy. Africa 54's Paul Ndiho has more.
Dubbed as changemakers, Ghanaian-born Kwebena Osi Labi and Cameroonian Kimeni Ngado met as students at the University of Southern California, and they quickly bonded over their shared West African backgrounds and discovered that both of them had a passion for playing video games. But they wanted to do much more. They decided to turn that passion into a business, and K-Derby Gaming Company was born. A mission-driven, Africa-led, Los Angeles-based mobile gaming company that pairs philanthropy and entertainment to create social change. K-Derby co-founder Kwebena Osilabi explains.
K-Derby is a mobile gaming company that pairs entertainment mobile games with pressing real-world social causes in order to create change and allow users to make a difference in the real world while having a good time playing some entertaining games.
Today, they are part of a creative team at the University of Southern California who use the incubation lab to develop mobile video games. The USC incubator accelerates the development of top students and alumni entrepreneurs through experimental education, mentorship, and community.
We build our games for both Android and iOS, both platforms, and they're all completely free to play, but we build them around important issues. So the first game we built is called Wild Warriors, and it's built around endangered animals and wildlife conservation. The game is being used to help save and rescue some of the world's most endangered and at-risk animals. We have over 20 species included in the game right now, and over 67 levels. It's a puzzle adventure game.
The pair taught themselves how to code and develop games using free online resources, reading books, and tapping into their passion of video playing games. K-Derby co-founder Kimeni Ngadu graduated with a degree in human biology and a minor in entrepreneurship. How do you combine human biology and what you are doing now?
My science side, which is my biology side, it really helped me with the psychology behind the games, you know. And there's two aspects of it, which I didn't mention in the first part. But one is like how do we get people more engaged in the game? How do we get people to interact more in the game? How do you get people's brains to how do you give them something and then not give them too much of it and then make them want to do even more, you know, through the games.
Kimeni says a single game today has the potential to reach and entertain millions of people. However, the impact of most games usually stops there. But for these two gamers, that wasn't enough.
We work with four of the largest wildlife conservation organizations, and so we try to have them, you know, market the game for us on their social media accounts. So they have a combined 3+ million followers on Facebook, and so we try to tap into that, you know, for our marketing.
The game is pretty easy to play. Even for a non-gamer like me, I was able to quickly pick it up. The game is free and available on the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store. But the players can choose to buy only virtual goods in the game with real money. Kwebena and Kimeni are building a team of marketers, engineers, artists, and designers from all over the world. The developers also have their sights set on other games that will support a range of additional causes, from tackling wild hunger to childhood poverty to promoting gender equality and children's health. Paul Ndiho, VOA News, Washington.
And that's our show for today. Have a good night. Thanks for watching.
Welcome to English in a Minute. When something loses its original shape or form, it does not look very natural or comfortable.
Bent out of shape.
Hey, did you tell Greg about my dinner party?
Yeah, I did. I thought he was invited.
Well, now he's all bent out of shape because I didn't invite him.
I'm sorry.